Getting going live. And you should be good to go. Go ahead.
All right. Good morning. My name is Scott Jordan. I'm Executive Vice President for Administration and Chief Financial Officer at UConn. Welcome to our town hall meeting on tuition fees and financial aid for the next academic year for what we call fiscal year 2022. I'm joined today by our Provost, Carl Lejuez, and other administrators. If we could do a quick round of introductions. Carl? You're on mute.
Carl Lejuez, Provost and Professor in Psychological Sciences.
Michael?
Good morning. I'm Michael Gilbert, Vice President for Student Affairs.
Nathan?
Hi there. I'm Nathan Fuerst, Vice President for Enrollment Planning and Management.
Lloyd?
Hi, Lloyd Blanchard, AVP for Budget Management and Institutional Research.
And Jeremy?
Jeremy Campbell, University Budget Office.
Great. And also joined by Debbie Caron and Donna Bauskas, who help keep us going today. Before we get started, Debbie, you have some announcements on how to participate in today's call?
Yes. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please email evpacfo@uconn.edu. This email will be monitored throughout the meeting, and the questions will be forwarded and shared with the panelists for their response. Today's town hall meeting will be recorded. The presentation to be shown and the recording of the meeting will be available on the web at budget.uconn.edu/townhall-meetings. Those will be posted later today or tomorrow as soon as this recording is available to us. Thank you. And Scott, when you're ready for the presentation, just let me know.
Great. Thank you, Debbie. Also, my understanding also is that the information that Debbie just provided is posted in the YouTube meeting, in the notes for the meeting on YouTube. So if there's in the description below, I'm being told. So thank you for that. And please feel free to type questions throughout the discussion today, and we will take them as they come in. First of all, thank you for joining us. The purpose of today's meeting is to consult with you, the students and the community at UConn before we present a proposal for tuition fees and financial aid to the Board of Trustees at their meeting next week. It is in the university's bylaws that we will consult with students before we change tuition or fees, and so we're doing so today. Your input is important to us. We really do take your questions into account and your concerns as we proceed with the Board of Trustees. So please participate. So I'll dig right in. Debbie, go ahead and put the presentation up. As she said, this presentation will be available on our website after the meeting. So I hope everybody can see this. First slide, Deb, go ahead. So at the University of Connecticut last year, the university's Board of Trustees approved an approach for setting tuition each year that relies on a formula. The formula uses an inflation measure, inflation being that sort of natural increase in costs at the university. The impact of state action on the university's budget, either through direct change in state support or changes in things like fringe benefit costs, plus a $100 fixed increase per year that we set aside to make UConn better. You'll note that in this formula, the first two factors, inflation plus the impact of state changes in support for the university, really are just an amount to keep UConn as good next year as we were this year. And our goal always is excellence and to make UConn a better place. And so we did build in a fixed amount of growth in tuition to help fund that increase in excellence. The result of this formulaic approach is that the university's Board of Trustees last year approved an increase in tuition for the coming academic year, 21-22, of $625, a 4.3% increase for in-state tuition. It's also worth noting that $625 is the lowest increase in tuition proposed in, I'll probably get this wrong, but just about a decade. I think it's been since 2010 that we've had such a low proposed increase in tuition. I do want to note, though, that the university's administration proposal for next year is actually to reduce that tuition increase, to cut tuition from what our current approved tuition rate is by 50%. That is, that we would increase tuition by $312 next year, rather than the $625 that the Board of Trustees has already approved. We're doing this for a number of reasons, but all of it related to the understanding the financial stress that we are all under during the COVID crisis. The university strives to maintain excellence in our programming, and we want to raise tuition as little as possible to maintain excellence, and to maintain affordability. And so we took a hard look at it this year and asked, what is the bare minimum that we could get by while not compromising your educational experience? And we arrived at this number. So the proposal is to cut the rate of increase by half for next year. Next slide, Deb. We're also looking at certain fees. It is worth noting that the way that UConn is funded is that your education, what happens in the classroom, is funded by tuition plus support from the state of Connecticut. The things that happen outside of the classroom, all of the great support and activities and programming that happen are largely funded through fees. We have committed this year, and in fact, this slideshow should have had a slide before this slide that announced that we were freezing most of our fees from last year to this, from this year to next year. We will not be increasing room or board or the general university fee or the infrastructure fee or the rec fee or any of the other fees that are listed on your fee bill. Again, with a strong mind towards affordability and accessibility and understanding the stress that we're all under during the COVID crisis, we only want to raise fees when it's absolutely necessary. And there are 3 fees that we're looking at to increase for next year. The first fee is the transit fee. The university's transit fee pays for the shuttle bus system at stores, shuttles at the regional campuses, particularly Stamford and Hartford, that provide shuttle services to parking and to mass transit, and for the state's UPass program. The UPass program is a statewide program for that allows UConn and Connecticut State College students free access to all public transit in the state. It's a fantastic program. You can travel from stores all the way to Stamford on buses and on rail without having to pay any additional cost through this program. And the university is an enthusiastic participant in it. And the success, we all should be proud, and you all should be proud. More than 12,000 UConn students used this program last year. The program is costing more money this year, and the result is that UConn's share of the cost of the program has gone up. So our proposal is to raise the transit fee by $8 next year. That's $4 per semester for all students to provide for those costs of the UPass program. The State Department of Transportation, which administers the program, is also working on an app that will make it even easier for you to access the program through your phone. So we do think that this is a good proposal and a good value still for the university and for our students. The second fee that we're looking at to raise next year is the student health and wellness fee. The student health and wellness fee provides for the student health and wellness at the university, what we call SHAW, a whole host of programs that provides really a comprehensive healthcare system for our students. Over the course of the last several years, students have been asking for increased mental health and counseling services, and we're hearing you. Last year, the president commissioned a mental health and wellness task force to take a look at how we're providing these services to students. The task force recommended expansion of services, and we plan next year at the Storrs campus to add 4 new mental health clinicians and 3 health educators focusing on mental health. The cost of this expansion of services adds up to about $56 per student. So this is a proposal to increase the student health and wellness fee by $28 per semester for Storrs-based students to pay for this increased mental health and wellness programming. It's also worth noting that this is not 100% of the impact of this task force. There are a whole host of changes that we plan to make mental health and counseling more available to students at Storrs and eventually to the regional campuses too. Michael Gilbert, our Vice President for Student Affairs, knows more of the details of those expansions, and I'll give him the opportunity to share some of that with you now.
Thank you, Scott. What I would highlight is actually a point that you made earlier, and this investment is in direct result of the feedback we've received from students and the deliberations of the mental health task force that worked throughout the fall semester. This will grow the clinical hours available for students to meet with clinicians significantly in the coming year. And also the health education positions are critical because some of the need to improve well-being and mental health involves educational engagement and activities and focusing on wellness as a broader campus. These educators will also take on some responsibilities that were previously covered by social workers who were clinicians and psychologists who took time away from serving as clinicians and offering direct care to students to serve broader interest in the campus community. And we will refocus them on serving as clinical providers to students. And this will really amplify the available hours and availability of staff in the coming years.
Thank you, Michael. The third fee that we're looking at for next year is the student activity fee. Student activity fees at UConn are very much a democratic process whereby student activities that charge fees are allowed through the student government and governing process to propose changes to that fee structure and to run them up through the administration for approval. Examples of student activities that are funded in this way are the student government itself, USG, and the Graduate Student Senate, the Daily Campus, our newspaper, the radio station, WHUS, and TV, UConn's TV station. There are a whole number of these sorts of activities that are funded through relatively small fees that add up to what we refer to as our student activity fee. This year, we've got 2 student activities that have come up through the process and asked for increased funding. And those are the Nutmeg Yearbook, which has for a very long time now has faced increased publishing and printing costs. You may or may not know this. Every student at UConn, when they graduate, gets a yearbook sent to them. It's a beautiful color yearbook that you get with your picture in it, and at no additional cost. So we have no graduation fees at UConn, no additional costs to you, but over the course of your career at UConn, a small fee is collected in the student activity fees that goes towards this benefit. As I said, those printing costs have gone up for years, and it is time to raise the fee a little bit to help pay for that yearbook that will come to you when you graduate. The second part of the student activities fee that we're proposing an increase to will benefit SUBOG, the Student Union Board of Governors. The Student Union Board of Governors provides activities principally through the Student Union at the Storrs campus. And again, this proposal of $4, which is $2 a semester, is just for Storrs-based students, Storrs-based undergraduate students. As we SUBOG is in need of additional funding at this time to continue to provide great programming and activities for students at the Student Union and across campus. This includes activities like the spring concert, which SUBOG sponsors. Their goal is to continue to provide great programming and to not charge an admission fee wherever possible, especially as we all come back, we hope, in the fall. We're going to really need this kind of programming and SUBOG's efforts to bring us all together and reinvigorate that community that we all miss come post-COVID. And Michael, I don't know if there's anything you can add. I know this is near and dear to you.
Well, Scott, I think you captured very well the mindset that the student organizations had in making these proposals and justifications for increases. You did a particularly good job, and I thank you for your comments about the outstanding work that SUBOG does for the campus and for UConn every year. The only other nuance that I'll mention is that the Nutmeg student leaders have been asking for a fee increase every year that I've been at the university, which is 8 years now. And this would represent the first increase that they've received in their funding since the inception of the current group in 2002. So I think we can say it is thoughtful and well justified, and in some ways, the Nutmeg student leaders have tightened their belt, and I think that they've gone as far by constraining expenditures to sustain the program and continue with the publication of the book. They do need additional resources.
Great, thank you, Michael. Next slide, Debbie. So there is an additional category of fees that we want to share with you that I know for most undergraduates and graduates of the university is of limited interest, but we do want to make sure that we're being fully transparent with the university community. There are a number of programs that UConn offers that can best be described as certificate or professional programs, mainly through our graduate schools. School of Business is the leader in this area and offering executive MBA programs, part-time MBA programs, programs in human resource management. These are the kind of programs that you might take as a mid-career learner, often paid for by your employer to sharpen your skills. Also in the School of Nursing, we have certificate programs, and these are programs that are expected to pay their own way. They receive no cross subsidy from undergraduate or graduate tuitions or from the state of Connecticut. And in fact, to the contrary, to the extent these certificate and professional programs bring in more money than they expend to provide the programs, they actually help subsidize the overall university. And so we set tuition and fees for what we call self-sustaining academic programs according to market. And the leaders that run each of the programs will survey the market around what others charge for similar offerings, will propose changes in these fees to their deans, who bring them to the provost, who vets them and brings them before you today. And what you see on this table are proposed increases in these professional and certificate programs on a per credit basis. So what you're seeing is for the most part, is a $50 to $75 proposed increase per credit hour for these sorts of programs. So we bring these to you because they will be put in front of the board next week, but they have no impact on most undergraduates or graduates at the university. Next slide. And so to sum up for next academic year, compared to our current published tuition and fee schedule, for undergraduates, we are proposing a reduction in cost of $244 next year. That is a reduction in the rate of increase in tuition by $313, and an increase in student health, student activities, and transit fee. And I think I read that wrong. I think it's $245, not $244. For graduate, very similar changes, increase in tuition from this year, a reduction from our currently approved schedule, and a reduction in total costs of $249, I believe that says. It's very small, I'm sorry. The net result is that for undergraduates, in-state undergraduate students at UConn next year, the increase in total cost of attendance will be 1.2%, which we think is the minimum amount that we can do to provide the same high quality undergraduate experience that you expect from a top 25 public research university, while maintaining accessibility and affordability. Very important to what I just said, maintaining accessibility and affordability, is our approach to financial aid and our approach to how we distribute federal dollars that we've received, that the federal government has earmarked for students. And if there are any questions about the first half of our presentation today about tuition and fees, please email them to the address posted below in the description under on the YouTube meeting, and we'll address those as we go. But seeing none at this time, I'll turn it over to Nathan Fuerst, our Vice President for Enrollment, to talk about the university's commitment to affordability, and to describe for you the approach that we'll take in distributing federal funds to students this year. Nathan?
Thank you, Scott. And as Scott pointed out, it's so important when we talk about cost of education that we talk about the whole picture, and we haven't often done so when we've talked about tuition in the past. So I think it's really great that when we think about what future costs might be for students, that we also provide a good understanding of what it is that we do to help our students in meeting the cost of attendance to come to the University of Connecticut. So the first way that we do that is we take a step back and look at the aggregate. And you can see that this slide is depicting the total amount of financial need of our students. That is the cost of attendance less the student's ability to pay according to the FAFSA and what the remaining balance is. And that total amount is $341 million. And that's a sizable sum of money. We actually, through a variety of sources, which I'll show on the next slide, come close to covering half of that with free gift aid. That's just awarded to the student, and it credits their account and covers those balances. The remaining part of the cost of attendance is covered by the students in the form of about a quarter of it through loans and work study, and leaving the rest of the balances to be made up by students and their families through college savings plans that they may have in place as the family planned to pay for college, personal payments, or other outside sources that the student may bring with them. There are other metrics that aren't necessarily shown on the slide here that we watch very closely, like average indebtedness and default rates and the like. It's important that we watch that because on the back end of your college education, of course, it's a good question to know how much are you leaving with. And the average indebtedness of our graduates is actually right at or below the national average at around $28,000. And actually very low as compared to Connecticut institutions across the board. And that figure is around $38,000. And so at $28,000, we're doing well, and that number hasn't moved in the last several years a whole lot, but that's something that we watch very, very carefully. Next slide, please. So this slide gives you an idea of what the overall financial aid budget looks like and how it has been changing in recent history. The first line shows institutional support. The second line, state support. We do get a limited amount of financial aid dollars from the state of Connecticut through the Roberta B. Willis Scholarship Program. Of course, federal programs, which we'll talk a little bit more about, the CARES Act, which is also referred to as HEERF on the slides here, and then there are a number of other sources. But as you can see on this slide, the university has been increasing its level of support for financial aid each and every year over the course of the past 5 years. In fact, that has been a trend, and we're very grateful in the work that we do through our financial aid office for the incredible amount of support that our leaders, our president, Tom Katsouleas, and our CFO, Scott Jordan, and others who are on the call here have provided to financial aid over time. I would just point out on the federal line that for FY20 and FY21, those amounts jumped from FY19 primarily because of CARES Act. And so those monies are represented there, not obviously built into the financial aid packages and are passed through to the students, which is, I think, a good segue to the next slide. If you could, Debbie. Next slide, please. Actually, before I get to that, this slide actually gives you an idea of what are the typical award amounts that students are looking at when we distribute financial aid. And also, what is the percentage of students that actually are eligible for some of these programs? So we talk a lot about federal Pell Grants. And you know, some students might be saying, well, I don't get a federal Pell Grant. About 27% of our students get a Pell Grant, and that average award is, as you can see on the screen, about $4,800, as opposed to federal SEOG, which assists students at $3,800, and 2% of our students receive federal SEOG funds. But you can see that the largest source of assistance for our students actually comes from UConn in the form of need-based and merit-based scholarships. So we're offering students an average of around $7,400 in need-based awards, and that assists almost a third of our students. And on the merit side, slightly less, and those students receiving around $9,500. Of course, all of these things go to contribute towards helping students meet the cost of education, and overall, about 62% of our undergraduates receive some form of gift aid. Next slide, please. So in a second, I'm going to show you the plan for CARES Act, this latest round that we received. But as you know, we had an earlier round of CARES Act, so I thought it might be good to show you all what actually happened with the first round of CARES Act funds that we distributed last spring. First, it's worth noting that even before CARES Act was approved by Congress and signed by the president in 2020, the university leapt to action and actually started distributing emergency funds to students, and any student that came forward and said, you know, due to the pandemic, I'm not able to work, or due to the pandemic, maybe my parents lost their jobs and therefore my family income has changed. The university actually stepped forward in a very aggressive way and distributed close to $3.5 million in aid to students over and above any CARES Act monies that were put out there. We started doing that just as soon as the pandemic hit in March of 2020, and that continues today. So there are funds that are available, but of course, CARES Act stepped in and provided a significant amount of support for our students, about $10.8 million to be exact. So, and what we did the last time around is we put about 92% of the funds out immediately, really without doing much of, other than looking at those 8 applicants that we had straight out of the gate. And that was done because the federal government told us that there were two key directives in terms of how we should utilize the funds. One was to try and get the monies out as quickly as we could and get it directly into the hands of students. And the second thing was to make sure that we are identifying our students with the greatest amount of financial need and assisting those students. And so that's exactly what we did across all career levels. providing an average amount of $875 to over 12,000 students. The remaining amount we made available to students to apply and say, hey, you know, I hadn't submitted a FAFSA before, but I'm facing some financial constraints as a result of the pandemic. I'd like to submit a FAFSA now. So we did award a number of funds to students through that second phase of the program the last time around. Next slide, please. So this time around, as we shaped the program, of course, we have to follow the directions of the federal government in terms of distributing the funds. There are a lot of similarities to the last time around, in that we have to deliver the funds directly to the students, that we need to assist students with the greatest amount of financial need. We actually have a year to distribute the funds. And so this time around, what we wanted to do a little differently was to spread our awards over time, as we are seeing students that are impacted the most as a result of the pandemic. You know, we're talking about students that are looking for support to pay rent or for support to buy groceries. In certain instances, students who are not only facing food insecurity, but home insecurity, or are homeless and working with their families to try and find a more secure place to live. And so those are very serious constraints, as we know, and appreciate for those students that are in those situations that we want to try to assist, and we want to try and do so over time, not necessarily just as a one-time shot. So there will be a number of phases this time around, which you'll see on the next slide. We are going to take an approach similar to the last time around, where we identify our first round of recipients through those FAFSAs that have already been submitted. And so we'll go through a process of identifying those students based on the greatest need and distribute those funds to them. But there will be another wave, just like we did the last time around, another phase where students can fill out a web form if they hadn't already submitted a FAFSA, and identify to us that they are facing financial constraints and need some assistance. And so we'll be doing a bit more of that this time around than what we did the last time around. The last point on this slide is really about our undocumented students. And while the dollar figures that you see on the next slide do not include funds to undocumented students, as the federal government does not allow us to utilize HERF monies for undocumented students, the university has made a decision both the last time around and this time around to award undocumented students the same amount of funds that we're awarding U.S. citizens and permanent residents who are eligible and have submitted a FAFSA. So if you happen to be an undocumented student that has filled out the undocumented student aid application, you will see a similar, actually an identical amount of support as your fellow students who submitted the FAFSA. Next slide, please. So this gives you an overview of the phases and how we will be approaching it this time around. So phase one will be awarding funds to those students who are of the highest need. For example, those students who are eligible for federal Pell Grants. And, you know, as we know, undergraduate students benefit from Pell Grants, but this phase one applies to all students across all degree-seeking career levels. So even if you're not necessarily receiving a Pell Grant or of that particular income level or ESE, you will receive $500 based on our estimates that will go out to about 8,500 students straight away. And so that's the first thing that we will do. And this will begin happening, by the way, in the next several weeks, where students will begin to receive notice of those funds coming to them and checks delivered, of course, through our bursar's office. Phase two, which will happen almost concurrently, will go to students of modest need. And really what that is the next level up in terms of students with financial aid outside of Pell eligibility. And we'll award to around 4,100 students $250 based on our existing aid applications. And the goal here, of course, is to get money into the hands of students as quickly as we can. Phase three will be when we open up a process for students to submit to us a web form where they can identify that they're facing financial challenges, and we can award $250 to students through that phase. it's important to note that actually students who will be assisted in phase 1 and phase 2 are eligible to submit the web form for phase 3 as well. And that, we may be able to deliver $500 to a student in phase 1, and that's great. Students may be saying, actually, I need a little bit more than $500. $500 is great, but can I get a little bit more support? And the answer to that question is yes. We can provide you some additional support, and we plan to help about 4,000 additional students through that process. The remainder of the funds, and the point of me suggesting earlier that we're spreading this over time, is that we're taking the remainder of the funds and really putting them in TBD, to be determined. And the reason we're doing that, of course, is what I mentioned before, is that the needs of our students are changing, they're evolving, and we want to be in a position to be able to spread this out and continue to provide support to students who are really facing some hard financial circumstances as a result of the pandemic. And so those details will be released to students, of course, as they become available. So that's the summary of our CARES Act approach. I don't know if anybody has any questions or if anything has come in via the email. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have.
So I'll ask Debbie and Donna, who are watching the email for us. Are there any questions at this time?
No questions have been submitted.
Thank you, Donna. I will ask and answer a question that I received last night. In fact, I've got two of them. The first question is if you're really committed to accessibility and affordability, why are you raising tuition at all? Couldn't you have just frozen tuition for next year? The answer to that question is that we are in fact committed to accessibility and affordability, and also to excellence. We are committed to providing the best possible higher education experience that we can for students at UConn. And faced with inflation in costs, with costs related to COVID, and flat and in some cases declining state support, we've done everything that we can at this time, including on the expense side, implementing our hiring freeze and spending freeze, furloughing managers. You should know all managers at the university took a pay cut last year, and that we are managing expenses very carefully, and that we really did work this number down to as low a number as we felt we could responsibly, and continue to provide the level of excellent education that you deserve. So that's where we ended up in making this decision, that we would increase tuition, but we would cut the rate of increased tuition to as low a rate as possible. It's also worth noting, and why the second half of our presentation today was about financial aid and distribution of federal funds, is that tuition is half of the equation for accessibility and affordability. The other half is, what do we do to help students who have need to meet that need? And we are committed to increasing our aid budget each year to very closely tracking need and trying to meet that need, and to being thoughtful about how we distribute those dollars that the federal government has given us, free dollars to help you all meet your needs, both UConn needs and your general needs. I mean, these dollars are not required to be spent on your education, and are not required. In fact, we are prohibited from getting between you and them. So we will not be applying them to your fee bills first and then giving you the balance. We will simply be distributing the money. It's our expectation that for most students at UConn, next year will be more affordable, not less. That is sort of the sum total of everything we've talked about today. So we hope that's true for most of you. And if there's, again, Nathan's door and the financial aid office's door is always open if there are extraordinary circumstances that require that you need some help. The second question that we got last night had to do with student activity fees, and it was a simple question, which is, how can you be sure that the student organizations that are asking for these fees really need the money? And don't they have fund balances still? And I think the answer to that is that we keep a close eye. You know, that we are respectful of the role of student government and student organizations in minding their own business and governing themselves. But we do have an oversight role in providing for these sorts of increases. And as Dr. Gilbert said earlier, the Nutmeg, the yearbook, for example, has been asking for an increase for 8 years. And this year we are convinced that that is needed in order to continue to provide that service to students. So we hope that there are enough guardrails built into the system to ensure that when students and student groups and student government need the funding, that it is being carefully managed. And I don't know, Michael, I know Michael and Jeremy are both part of the governance process on that. I want to make sure I got that right.
Yes, that's correct.
Great, thank you. So those are the two questions I had before the meeting started. And I'll ask one last time, Deb and Donna, if you've received any in the inbox.
Nothing.
Okay, well, I do want to thank those, and it looks like we've had 32 people watching today. I want to thank you all for joining. The video of this meeting will be posted as soon as it's available, and the slides as well. I'll also say that email box that has been posted for you to use is monitored all the time, not just during this town hall meeting. So if you think of questions, or if you watch the video and have a question, please feel free to email anytime, and we will get right back to you. So thank you for your attention and participation today. On behalf of the other administrators on the call, we appreciate your input. Take care.